my name is Salah Nasri, and welcome back to the Semiconductor Leadership Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. This podcast is dedicated to tech executives, notably in the semiconductor manufacturing community, to enhance their personal lives and careers. Now, the previous episode was focused on the importance of sleep. And throughout this podcast series, we will continue to cover vital habits to enhance your personal life. However, I have decided to mix it up and include valuable learnings from a business point of view. And today, we will cover the great Andy Groves, former CEO of Intel, who is known for maximizing Intel to its optimum prime points. I have read Andy Groves' Only the Paranoid Survive several times, and it is truly a formidable book. Now, with every book one reads or podcast they listen to, one must question, what's in it for me? In this episode, we will learn how one of the most successful companies, especially in semiconductor manufacturing in the world, Intel, one of our vital members at our association, the International Semiconductor Executive Summits, survived moments of crisis. Now, during his time as CEO of Intel, Andrew Grove helped the company to overcome numerous, apparently insurmountable hurdles to its existence. In Only the Paranoid Survive, Grove draws on his experience to present a strategic model that can help companies not only to cope with moments of critical change, but also to exploit them and thrive. Terming such moments as strategic inflection points, or SIPs, Grove presents invaluable advice for making the most of the sink or swim moments in a company's life. In this episode, you'll learn why it's not always a good idea for a company to keep secrets. You'll find out why you should maintain open communication with outsiders like journalists or at conferences as ours. And you'll learn why it's a terrible idea for a company to trust the opinion of someone who feels emotionally attached to it. What I can tell you is that the key message in this book is managers and employees of companies should prepare themselves for the inevitable moments of crisis that occur in a company's life. These are termed as SIPs, strategic inflection points, and by acting on a few principles, these critical points can be not only overcome, but also exploited for the company's good. So what are strategic inflection points? Whenever there's a change in the market, companies have to reevaluate their strategies. There are critical moments during the life of any company when its entire strategy needs to be brought into question, and these are known as strategic inflection points, SIPs. But what's behind these moments of crisis? There are 6 forces at play in the competitive well-being of a company which can compel it to consider its strategic options. These forces are the strength of its competitors, suppliers, existing customers, potential customers, and complementers. And finally, the possibility that business can be done in a different way. Any disturbance in the balance of these forces will transform the company's business environment. So consider, for example, the computer company IBM, which was greatly affected by a major shift in how its business could be done. Once it became possible for consumers to combine components like microchips, hard drives, and software that were produced and sold by different companies in an individual PC, pre-built computers were no longer as popular. So customers simply preferred selecting their own parts and combining them to make a PC of their own design. Although IBM tried to continue developing its pre-built PCs, their overall design failed to compete with the possibilities of customizable PCs. The result? They sold fewer PCs than other companies sold components. Although it's clear that any change in these forces may alter the way that companies can succeed in a given market, it can sometimes be difficult for a company to spot even a major change. For instance, while changes in technology are usually quite easy to detect because inventions or improvements directly linked to the production process or the business itself are ordinarily fairly concrete and observable, and a change in the strength of a competitor will be harder to notice. So since some of these 6 forces are easier to spot than others, companies should be on the lookout for any changes which might affect them. Employees must react to strategic inflection points, not only in their company, but also in the wider market. SIPs are not relevant to CEOs alone. Rather, they have an impact on a company at every level, and therefore on every single employee. For that reason, all employees should be prepared for such critical situations, as jobs are often endangered at these moments. In extreme cases, an SIP can even result in a business shutting down, which means that every single employee loses their job. But even if the company manages to survive, it might have to restructure, resulting in some workers becoming unemployed. And in still other cases, people are forced to acquire new skills and to adapt to new unfamiliar business environments. Often, an SIP forces employees to change the way they operate as individuals in the market. When, for example, the first talkie movies were released, actors were impelled to choose whether to stick with silent movies or adapt to the new way of acting that movies with sound required. Now, while some failed to redefine themselves as sound movie stars, others succeeded, though sometimes reluctantly. Let's say, for example, Charlie Chaplin, for instance. He was a bitter opponent to the coming of sound, yet ultimately, even he was forced to submit and produce his first talkie, The Great Dictator. Furthermore, SIPs have even caused some types of jobs to become almost extinct. This is especially true in the case of major technological changes. For example, at the beginning of industrialization, traditional craftsmanship was in danger of becoming obsolete as factories were able to produce the same products much faster and cheaper. Because their skills were no longer in demand, and almost all craftsmen were forced to quit their businesses and work at the factories. The few craftsmen who could survive independently were those who specialized in higher quality production, thereby distinguishing their businesses. Ta-da! So, individuals as well as companies must react to SIPs, and they can do this by properly analyzing their individual situation, specializing, or acquiring new skills. So, strategic inflection points can lead a company either to catastrophe or a new chance to success. The development of the Japanese memory chip manufacturing industry had a huge impact on Intel, which was formerly a memory chip company, because the Japanese were able to sell chips at prices Intel simply couldn't match. As a remedy, Intel invested heavily in the development of its chips, but to no avail. The company faced an existential crisis to the dismay of the management and existing employees, Intel decided that it would have to change everything that had been crucial to their success so far, from their oldest plants to their most established departments. Intel had little choice. An SIP can lead to a total catastrophe for a company if its management doesn't recognize the new situation and react appropriately. One reason that managers ignore new developments is that they're emotionally attached to the existing way of doing business. And a consequence of this is that while a company continues to reproduce the same once successful measures as always, the already transformed business environment means that those measures might now result in an outright failure. As when Intel tried to fight the powerful Japanese memory chip industry by investing in the development of its own chips. However, if a company adopts an effective strategy at precisely the right time, SIPs offer them the opportunity to establish and lead a completely new market. Also, having to reposition a business in a new market, but one which also requires a similar business strategy, can have positive effects. So, in the case of Intel, their strategy in the face of Japanese companies was a combination of technological development and new strategic positioning of their business. Specifically, they put their focus on their resources into microprocessors, redefining themselves as a microprocessor company, a field in which they became the market leader in a very, very short time. SIPs can be very dangerous for companies. However, by taking the right action at the right time, SIPs can present a chance for success in the future. An important element is that SIPs can confuse a business, so strong leadership is needed to ensure companies remain focused and relevant. When an SIP strikes, there's a chance of serious confusion within a company. What direction should the company take? Should they make permanent changes or only temporary ones? This uncertainty demands that someone has a clear sense of the direction the company should take. What's needed is a leader. In large companies, it's the CEO, who must have a clear vision of the company's future. They have to communicate their vision clearly and constantly, as failure to do so can have negative consequences. For example, the head of one of the Japanese companies was asked about its general strategy, but he refused to discuss it, fearing the competition would use the information to their advantage. Whether correct in that fear or not, his silence sent a negative message to the company's employees and to the public. When a company's strategy must be redefined, CEOs mustn't be scared of changing the core of the business. This is not easy to accomplish, as they and their staff are usually emotionally attached to the business in its present state. Another reason that redefining strategy is difficult is that it can involve letting a lot of jobs go and employing new staff in new positions. However, again, you must face this task without fear and persevere with it. For example, until the memory crisis of the 1980s, Intel had been the memory company. Andrew Grove, its CEO at the time, insisted that the senior staff redefine Intel as the microprocessor company. And though there was an initial resistance, eventually many of the staff appreciated having a new vision they could champion. Once a new strategy has been introduced, it then has to be implemented. But to do this, you must deliver the message to the relevant people. And secondly, act as role models for the rest of the company by committing immediately to the new strategy and all it entails. For internal and external employees to follow a new strategy, companies must transmit a clear and simple message. The confusion that SIPs can trigger over a company's direction can destroy team morale and cohesion, which means that the people involved won't be certain of what they should do. This can affect a company both internally and externally. For instance, employees will have no clear vision to follow, and they might be scared of losing their jobs, while a company's partners and suppliers might fret over how future changes will affect them. In order to avoid such uncertainty, companies must ensure that all their actions are in line with a clearly defined new vision. This means that the redefinition of the business must be reflected in changes to its organizational structure. New staff need to be hired, or old staff need to be retrained, and new complementers and suppliers may need to be found. For the change to go as smoothly as possible, the new vision has to be communicated in a simple, effective message internally and externally. It's essential to convince all employees of this new vision. As to remain effective, they need to identify themselves with the new order of things. Also, complementers and suppliers need to be informed of the company's new vision so that they can adjust to the demands it entails. And they should be made aware that a future partnership is possible. So, the simpler the message, the more effective it will be. And one reason for this is that the simple messages tend to stick in the mind, and they may also give people a sense of security. Another reason is that they're more likely to be picked up and reproduced as headlines and sound bites by the media. In short, the moment a company arrives at a vision for its strategy, that strategy should be communicated clearly in words and actions so that employees and the outside world can learn of the change and react accordingly. So, this is part 1 to Only the Paranoid Survive by Andrew Groves. This will be continued to part 2 in due course, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please, if you enjoyed it, please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe, because if we have more followers in the back end, the more interesting this podcast will get. Thank you, take care, and see you at the next episode.